Hey, welcome in to another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast here on IdahoSports.com, episode 19. And man, we're essentially in the holidays. As always, it's streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our X account, and always sponsored by the great company of Cornerstone Insurance. Well, without further ado, let's bring on the co host, Ryan Scaggs. How are you, man? All the kids
We're
are on
doing,
break.
man. We're we have 2 days from Christmas, so um, kind of weird to say that, but hopefully everybody's got their shopping done. I think I finally did last night, so we're good. Didn't wait until the very last minute.
Absolutely. Well, since the holidays are underway, there's not a lot going on here, especially this week. Next week is when you might see a few more things happening in the sports world. But we wanted to spend some time and recap the last week, especially in the wrestling world, and then hit a little bit on the top teams in the basketball landscape. See if there are a couple big stories out of North Idaho that we wanted to hit on as well. So without further ado, Skaggs, I'll turn it all over to you, and you can just lay the land on the wrestling landscape of the last few weeks, last few days in North Idaho.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty good showing from the North. We didn't get the team titles like we've seen in the past at Tri-State, which was this last weekend at North Idaho College. And hats off to the NIC staff. They put on a phenomenal tournament this year. Um, that thing seems to go off without a hitch, and they've got that thing down to a science. And it stayed on schedule pretty nicely. I was able to be the public address announcer for finals at NIC, which was a ton of fun. So I got to see all of the championship matches, and I showed up early and watched the placing rounds too. So the third, fourth matches, the 5, 6, and the 7, 8 matches. Got to see a number of kids from North Idaho do really well. I mean, this is the best of the best tournament. So you got teams from Western Washington, teams from Montana, teams from Idaho, North Idaho, South Idaho, Southern Idaho, especially out of District 3, because Meridian and Rocky Mountain were there. So it's kind of a best of the best, and Tri-State, for folks that may not know a ton about it, is an absolute meat grinder and a great litmus test for the state tournament. If you place at Tri-State in the top 8, your season's going to go well for you. Historically, it's shown that Tri-State placers tend to go on and place within the top 4 or 5 at state. So if you're hitting the podium at Tri-State, you're doing something. But the North was represented pretty well, especially in the championship matches. At 106 pounds, we had a champ, Colton Story from Kellogg, won the whole thing. Did an awesome job. He wrestled his tail off in that match, ended up picking up a nice win over a Fargo All-American, a freshman from Gonzaga Prep in Spokane, Carver Peasley. Colton won by decision. He would finish 4th last year, get a championship this year in his junior season. Sorry. He's also the defending 3A state champ last year. So Colton, he looked awesome. I mean, he was just an absolute beast out there on the mat, especially for one of the small school North Idaho schools to get a champ is a big deal at Tri-State. Wyatt Carey from Timberlake took 2nd. Great showing from him. He finished 2nd at 113 pounds. He wrestled a stud. This Neri Rivas kid from Ording is a sophomore. He's a defending state champ in Washington, and he was a runner-up last year at Tri-State. He's also ranked nationally. That kid's a stud. He's an animal. He was the number 1 seed, and Wyatt ended up getting pinned in that match, but still wrestled his tail off. He's 16-1 on the year, doing a great job. And then Carson Leonard at 120 pounds from Lakeland picked up his first loss of the year in the championship round. He lost to Arcadius Cruz from Ording. The Cruz kid he's an animal. He's ranked, I think, 22 in the nation in his weight class. Just a beast. And Carson, in his own right, a 2-time defending state champ, just ran into a buzzsaw in the championship match at Tri-State, but I don't think that's going to derail his season by any means. Then you go through some of the other North Idaho kids popping back in at 150 pounds. This was one of the cooler showings was Zach David from St. Mary's, ended up getting runner-up. He finished 7th at Tri-State last year. He was a runner-up in 3A last year at state. And Zach came into the championship match, he wrestled Israel Acosta from Gonzaga Prep in Spokane. It's a 2-time defending state champ in the state of Washington. He won Tri-State 2 years ago and got 3rd the year before that. But yeah, Israel's he's an animal, and Zach wrestled him really tough and ended up losing by pin in the last 6 seconds of the match. But Zach had a great showing for the Lumberjacks. Then at 157 pounds, Colton Austin, he was the number 11 seed, made it all the way into the championship match. Lost to Isaac Dionigi from Tahoma. The kid, he was runner up in the state of Washington. He's placed all 3 years. He's a senior this year. The Dionigi kid is. He's placed all 3 years at state. He's favored at state in Washington in 4A in his weight class. And yeah, Colton's a cool story because not a lot of people know this, but like Colton, I believe, was heavyweight last year, and he lost he said he lost over 80 pounds in the off season, and now he's wrestling at 157 pounds. So that's a cool deal. He wasn't necessarily heavyweight; he was the 215 area last year, but to lose that much weight and come all the way down, and he's a specimen too. He's really put himself into really great condition, and wrestled a tough match, losing that one though to Dionigi. But I would expect big things from Colton in his senior season this year for the Trojans. Fellow Trojan at 165 pounds, Damian Hamilton won the championship at Tri-State at 165, defeating a defending state champ, Jason Novak from Kashmir. He won by fall in that championship match, which was a big win for Damian to get the Tri-State title, his first title. He's placed all 4 years at Tri-State, finally getting his first championship as a senior. Brock Armstrong at 190 pounds picked up the championship. He wrestled his tail off. He wrestled a really good kid from Camas, Cannon Frechette, and won handily. And Brock looked great in that match. And then he was also voted outstanding wrestler of for the heavyweights. So Brock had himself a heck of a tournament, getting a tri-state championship. Jackson Holman from Sandpoint at 215 pounds ended up finishing second. He wrestled Logan Eula from Meade, which the kid is a runner-up in the state of Washington at 4A last year. He's undefeated. Jackson picked up his first loss of the season, but still finished second at Tri-State. That's a phenomenal showing from him. And then going back, I believe, so that was in the second matches. Third and fourth, Gage Lofton from Post Falls finished fourth. Ian Schwecke from Moscow, but he's actually technically a Kendrick kid, finished fourth. At 132 pounds. Mason Falling from Lewiston finished fourth at 157. Aiden Yearout from St. Mary's finished fourth at 165. And then the 5-6 matches, Tristan Mendenhall of Post Falls was fifth. Zach Teal was sixth at 106. Rocco White from Coeur d'Alene was fifth at 113. Justice Peregrina of Coeur d'Alene was fifth at 120. Carson Hinkleman of Kellogg finished sixth at 126. Drake Spielman of Coeur d'Alene was sixth at 190, and Taylor Dodd from Bonners Ferry was sixth at 285. And then the 7th, 8th matches, Brian Patrick of Lakeland finished eighth at 98 pounds. Solomon Crowley of Lake City was eighth at 132. Gage McWaters of Lakeland was seventh at 175. And then Parker Bagley of Lewiston was seventh at 285 pounds. Parker is a cool story. He hasn't wrestled very long. And you can tell technique-wise that he hasn't wrestled long, but you talk about upside. He is a physical specimen on the mat. His athleticism definitely translates to the sport of wrestling. We saw him on the football field. You and I both saw him in person in games this year for the Bengals. And, that translated to the wrestling room. And he's showing up at Tri-State and taking 7th place. Great showing from Parker. That was kind of a cool story for him. And there was a little bit of buzz around him too, because he gets out there and he kind of just looks like a man. I mean, he legit looks like a 30-year-old dude out there. I mean, he's built, he's yoked, and he got out there and took care of business in that 7th, 8th match, which was pretty cool. So, but a great showing from the North. I think overall, I think this was a year we kind of talked about a little bit last week, but we may not see the state champ come out of the North from the team race, but we're going to see a lot of state individual champions come out of the North this year. And that's definitely going to show up. I think that, the cupboard for some of these teams, I don't know if Post Falls is going to repeat. They're going to be in the podium. But, you look at these rosters and the kids that they've got, there's some dogs out there. There's some absolute dudes that can step out there in any night, get you a big win. And that's a huge tournament. Like I said, the best of the best from Washington, Idaho, and Montana are there. So if you're placing there, you're doing something good. It was obviously the championship was won. I think it was either Ording or Tahoma. They were pretty close, neck and neck. Meade was right in the mix too in the top 3, but all Washington schools. But still an awesome tournament and just a great showing from these North Idaho kids.
Absolutely. We got a few comments coming in. Xander Scholes says Colton Austin was 235 as a freshman. And then Mike Scholes says Colton Austin started high school at 235, wrestled at state last year at 157, lost most of his weight since 10th grade.
Yeah.
Two things.
I was reading what was on his bio sheet, and he said he lost 80 pounds. So, like, that was crazy. So.
Do you think – I'm going to put you on the spot with a couple things. Do you think that is – an advantage coming in after losing all that weight? Like, I mean, absolutely. Is there any downside? You're wrestling all these bigger dudes.
If you're used to wrestling, 215, you're 235, 285. Like, these guys are going to feel like feathers when you start stepping out on the mat. I mean, the more weight you drop, you're keeping the same muscle mass. You're just losing the periphery mass around you. It's going to go well for you.
So, do you think there is a quickness element of it that you might have to adjust to?
Yes. Yeah. I think the guys, obviously you're going to be wrestling guys that are a little more agile, the smaller they are. But the strength element is where it really shone for Colton. And he's an ox out there. I mean, you look at him on the mat and he's muscling guys around. So he's used to the bigger bodies, which I think plays into his favor of, getting these smaller guys. He's going to be able to use more muscle. The quickness does come into it. You'll have some kids coming up that maybe are less, than 157, but it's going to go well for him, I think, this year, just based on the maturity too, that he's kind of grown into his frame. And you can tell that there could be big things coming from him this year, especially in the state of Idaho at that weight class. He's looking pretty darn good. Like, let's just be real.
Mm-hmm. Are there a lot? I'm just going to keep going now. Are there a lot of, when you wrestle, say you're at one weight class as a freshman, is it typical for you to continue going up in your weight class? Because it seems like a lot of times they stick to the weight class that they, had success in.
Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, you can't help but grow. So, I mean, some kids are going to grow, some are not others. I mean, like, I started my high school career as at 160 pounds, and every year I went up weight class. So, I mean, you'll grow. A lot of these kids, some of them don't. I mean, you'll see upperclassmen. I mean, I'll just use the example at 113 pounds. Wyatt Carey of Timberlake's a senior, and he's been there, 98, 106, 113 all the way through high school. So, and you're wrestling typically underclassmen in the lower weight classes. So, there's an advantage in that situation that he's going to have the maturity to where he's an 17, 18-year-old kid wrestling 14, 15-year-old kids, every week or so. So there's advantages and disadvantages, I would say. Two is if you're trying to keep that weight, sometimes you're having to suck or keep your weight down. So you're being more cognizant of, pluses and minuses of fuel, and have to have fuel out to maintain your weight. But there's obviously descent plans and things too. And it's early in the year, so there's guys that may be at, say, 190. They could be wrestling down later in the year as their descent plan allows them to go down. There's a lot that goes into wrestling now, that they have rules in place that you can't lose a certain amount of weight per week. Like, you've got to try to maintain and go down gradually, versus where, my era, we were throwing on garbage bags and putting on sauna suits and then putting on sweats and go sit in a sauna and spit in a cup and all that stuff. Those days, I mean, the kids that are close within a pound or two, you'll see that. But by and large, those days are done. I mean, you have to do your urine analysis test at the beginning of the year, where they do specific gravity to make sure that you haven't been dehydrated. There's all of these things, and you're constantly checking your weight as the season goes. And, so it becomes more maintenance than it does crash dieting. So it got rid of a lot of the unhealthy habits. But you still have to maintain and monitor what you're putting in, especially Christmas time. I mean, as a coach, that was the time of year that I'm like sitting there and dreading. I'd have my 135 pounder back in the old weight classes. He would go in and weigh 135 before Christmas, and he comes back and he has to wrestle at 145 because he just didn't have any discipline over the Christmas holiday, and he pigged out for a few days and comes back to practice, and you're like, dude, what the crap, man? So yeah, there's some headaches for coaches as far as monitoring, but these kids are so disciplined. That's the one thing about wrestling is that I love, is the discipline that it teaches these kids. And some think that it's unhealthy or whatever, and it gives bad body image and all this other stuff. Like, that's just outside noise. Like, there's so many valuable lessons within it. The struggle of the sport. It teaches you lessons within the struggle. There's lessons about discipline and everything else, and doing the little things well. It's all stuff that translates to life as you grow to be a man or a woman. I mean, look at girls wrestling and the growth that's there too. There's a lot of valuable stuff that comes from the sport, that you learn things about yourself that you wouldn't normally know until you go through the struggle every week.
Mm-hmm. Mike Scholes, pondering off his last comment, says Xander Scholes re-aggravated his knee in the semifinals, had to medical forfeit to sixth place, not to make sure to injure his knee worse.
Yeah.
That's probably, something that maybe
That
wouldn't
was
have
a
happened
result I
back in
think
your
I
day.
missed. So I appreciate him saying that, because I didn't see that. I had Taylor Dodd at 285 getting sixth, but yeah, that was something that I think got bounced out of there that I missed. But yeah, I mean, those injury things too. You get to this tournament, and we've seen in years past 2 catastrophic injuries happen at Tri-State, just because the level of competition's so high that just freak things happen. And we've seen kids get hurt and miss the rest of the year or not come back until districts. So I mean, re-aggravating a knee and having a medical forfeit. I mean, I wouldn't poo-poo on that, saying that Xander is going to not have a good year or whatever. I think that was a smart decision to reevaluate, because there's a lot of season in front of all these kids. And then obviously the ultimate goal is to be on the podium come state tournament time.
Mm-hmm. No doubt there. One last thing I wanted to ask you. There is a lot of good programs here in North Idaho, like you mentioned, some reigning team state champions. What do you think it takes? What kind of culture do you have to build as a team to create a successful program in the sport of wrestling that maybe is different than other sports?
You have to. It's an individual sport first. Wrestling is, because it's you and the other kid on the mat, you and the other young man or young woman out there. I mean, there's only 3 people out there at a time, the official and 2 wrestlers. So you have to know your team. I think the biggest thing is it happens in the practice room. Your team culture is 100% built. How do you practice? And what you will typically see is where there's success, you'll see if one guy's really successful, there's either one right behind him that's placing too, or there's a weight class above or below that's placing as well. And so it's those practice partners in the room is what grows your culture. Post Falls has been a great example of that over the last probably 15 years, because they have so many dang kids in the room. But it's, you raise the level of the guys around you, those hammers that you get, the guys that go win national championships at Nebraska, and NCAAs. That started somewhere, and it started at the kids level. Like, it's club. I mean, it just goes up and up and up from there. A strong club program is going to build a strong high school program, and the coach is going to be involved in all steps, or multiple coaches. I think the other thing too that gets really unsung is coaching has so much to do with success of your team. I mean, you'll get the kids that train and do really well and do the Fargo circuit, and they do the training centers and all that stuff. Like, those guys are there. You'll see them kind of, we have 2 or 3 really good kids on a small school program. Well, those guys are probably putting in the time in the off season. They're wrestling freestyle. They're wrestling Greco. They're doing the, Fargo circuits and stuff like that. They're wrestling the USA wrestling programs. There's a lot of things that go into it. So you have, the buy-in from the kids. You've got the effort from the kids, that they're trying to match each other's effort. The young guys are wanting to emulate and have the success of the older kids. The coaching has a huge amount to do with that as well. The coaching's pouring into those kids, and there's time. The coaches are putting in time, going to clinics. They're getting new stuff. They're going back to the basics day in and day out. Getting it done in the classroom. The one thing that I think gets oversung is that, it's overlooked, is that a lot of these successful kids, they've all got 3.0 GPAs and higher. And I mean, by and large, when I did the bio sheets for all these kids at Tri-State especially, I think there was only 4 kids that had lower than a 3.0 GPA. So if you're an achiever and you're a high achiever in the sport of wrestling, it's going to show up in other areas too. And as a coach, that's a culture that you want to build, that like, you're going to be successful at whatever you do. If it's doing a fundraiser, you're going to blow it out of the water. If it's in practice and it's with your partner, you're going to blow it out of the water. If you're that person that's getting pushed as the number one, wrestler, and then you're number two, it's got to be like 1A, 1B. I mean, those kids are going to start making strides, and that's where you see those at-large bids to state, and you're seeing multiple kids from one school in a weight class. There's so much in it that goes in that it's not like football where it's like play calling and plug and play into a position, and that's how you have your success. Because I've coached both sports, wrestling and football, and they're so drastically different because you have to know your kid and who you can and can't push, but you also have to know your team of like, there's a lot of chess matching of like putting right guys in the right position. Like, hey, you're really strong. Maybe you wrestle up this week because we need that guy in this, to get fifth or better to get us those extra points to get us a team title. So there's a lot in there that gets moved around. And, if there's kids listening to, they're probably, there's individual things that each individual kid is so different. That you've got the kids that are playing Pokemon, they roll out on the mat and they go undefeated. Then there's other kids that are sitting there and they're junkies. They're in the corner yelling for their lightweights, and the younger kids in the blood rounds and stuff like that are like second coaches. And then there's other kids that are in the stands doing their homework. And there's just so many different types of kids that you'll see out there that all have success, but they all do it individually in their own way. And that's the cool thing, is that it's an opportunity for a kid to be unique. And so as a coach, if you're going to be successful, it's understanding your individuals and how they operate and being able to have a coach that fits that style. So the teams that have multiple coaches, it's like not every coach is going to go out there and be Dan Gable and just be screaming in the kid's face. You're going to have the other one that puts his arm around the kid, walks him through methodically. Hey, this is what happens. This is what doesn't happen. Breaking down film, match film, breaking down, scouting other kids that you're going to wrestle in the tournament. There's so many aspects to it that just go in. That's why I love this sport, is because it's not just a one size fits all thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got me fired up. I want to go. I want to go wrestle now. I want to go start a program. That's sweet. How many years did you coach wrestling?
So junior high and high school together, it was 11 years. Yeah.
So quite a bit of experience. So
yeah, and then you start
I'll
obviously when yeah, and then it's crazy is that you're always learning something new. Like you think you've got it all figured out and you don't. And I think that comes as a maturation from the coaching aspect too. Is that, the young bucks want to run out there and they just want to have, a team of hammers that just goes out there and, beats the snot out of everybody day in and day out. But you don't build that overnight. Like that doesn't just happen. And then you can't, it's hard to inherit. You can inherit a really good team and still fail. Like that happens too. And so if it's a clash of styles and that they don't buy into the motivation from you or whatever it is, like from the coach's side of it, being in the corner versus being on the mat, you have to be able to be flexible. You've got to be able to understand which kids you can really push the buttons on and get fired up, smack around, in the room. And, there was times where, I'd have to get on the mat and wrestle my guys because we just didn't have a heavyweight. We had one heavyweight and nobody else. So it was like, well, who's going to wrestle with that kid? Well, the coaches trade off beating on your heavyweight. So there was things that were like that, it's like, it's easier for a grown man to, even though he's got like 30, 40 pounds on me, it was easier for me to jump out there and roll with him than to make my 70 pounder wrestle my heavyweight every day in practice.
100%. And that's what makes wrestling so interesting is you've featherweights, lightweights, all the way up. It's not like one size fits all. For a basketball team, you're looking for a tall, lengthy dude, a really athletic dude, or a football, you're looking for a guy that's 6 foot 185. Wrestling, there's so many things. What kind of styles are there in wrestling?
Like, so stylistically there's just drastically different stuff. I mean, the same moves for a heavyweight aren't going to work for a 106 pounder. So, it helps to have coaches that have experience throughout the weight classes. So stylistically, you can individualize the type of coaching and training that these kids are going to get. It's like I wrestled, 160, 71, 89, like the upper weights, it was easier for me to coach the upper weight kids because that's, the training that I'd received and time that I'd spent, there was the translation. I had to go get coaching for how to coach the younger, like the smaller guys. So, it's different that like heavyweights, you're going to get throws and doubles. And, it's like stylistically, if you've got a heavyweight that's more athletic versus a push pull guy, it's like, okay, fine. We're going to do angles. We're going to work on low level single legs and things like that fit the style or fit the individual kid. If you got a short, squatty kid versus a tall, lanky kid, you're going to have kids that leg ride versus kids that just want to get chop arms, grab wrists, roll, throw in arm bars and go to town. So you're going to get different styles within each individual kid because all kids are built differently. They're not going to be able to do the same stuff necessarily. So there's a lot to it that goes in, and you have to understand the style of the kid and especially too how they've been trained before you get them. You kind of continue that. So if they're really good at certain aspect of the sport, you continue to push them in that and get them to hone their skill. There was a thing that, Dan Gable was huge on, was like, do the move 1,000 times. You can't perfect it unless you've done it 1,000 times. So like you can think, oh, I can do a double leg. That's easy. It's like, well, have you done it 1,000 times this year? Well, no. Well, then keep doing it. It's like, coach, I don't use this. Well, you may have to because you wrestle a kid that doesn't allow you to do your A game. So there's, you have to be able to be flexible with knowing, and there's so many different moves. That's the other thing about the sport is that, there's, limitless combinations that you can do. And, so it's like, if your opponent and he's only good at like these 3 things, and this is where his bread and butter is, get him out of his game. Don't let him get into that to where if he wants to throw and stuff like that, then you don't lean in on him and you don't hang your head and your arm and, or you don't put your body weight when you're up on your feet, you don't lean into him too much so you can get thrown. Okay, well, I'm going to stay outside. I'm going to keep my hands inside. I'm going to work his legs. And that way I'm going to keep away from his strength. So there's the chess match within individual matches and everything too. And, it's a really awesome sport because it's so unique and individual to who's on the mat. You're never going to see 120-pound match look like the other. And you may get kids that wrestle and they just do like, one thing extremely well. And then you'll get kids that don't really know a ton they know a little bit about a whole lot of things. And those are the matches that get crazy, that you'll see like a 25-23 score in a decision, is because they just go nuts and they don't really stick to one thing. And then you'll get another match the next time around, it's 3-1. I mean, that's just how it works. And, going back to finals at Tri-State, is that, there was a few matches that the scoreboard shorted out, like guys won by tech fall just because they're technically great. And then there was other matches that went like, they were just grinders. Like they didn't allow each other to do anything. And it ended up being like 4-2. So, like you'll get all different kinds of matches and it's pretty awesome. And if folks aren't familiar with the sport of wrestling, there's a reason why it's blowing up, like why it's grown so much and why it's so popular on the boys' side in North Idaho, but also why girls wrestling is getting to be so popular is because the stylistic thing is that, basketball, you can just run zone or you can run man, right? You can run zone a couple different ways or you can run man and that's it. To where wrestling, it's individualized to the person that's out there on the mat and they can have a place and they can have an opportunity to have success in their own thing. They don't have to rely on their teammates in order for their own success. They can go make and create their own success, and everything is in their own control. And that's the one cool thing about wrestling is that like you really do control your destiny.
Mm-hmm. And maybe it's different than what others would think, but I think it's also a lot different than track and field or cross country in the sense that it's individualized because you have your own style. You can win any way.
Well, I mean, you could be a state champion, but be on a team that finishes in like 17th. Like that happens. Like you can still be successful in the terms of success, but your team may not be that strong.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a good fix for any wrestling junkie out there. I hope they got it.
We'll still mat chat tonight, but yeah,
absolutely. A ton of good information. So throughout the year, we will continue to touch on wrestling and see the results come in. And we're excited to do that. Last comment, Taylor Dodd of Bonners Ferry took 5th in that 285 weight class. wrap up in the tri-state tournament last weekend. Let's switch over to girls and boys basketball, and then we'll hop out of here. First, let's touch on the two stories. Let's do 3 stories out of Northern Idaho. First one, Lake City boys travel over to the Moda Center in Portland and played a school out of Washington or Oregon. I'm skipping
Washington,
which one.
Right?
Annie Wright, which
they're out of
is
Tacoma.
which they're one of the better players on their team is a freshman, Isaiah Thomas, an NBA player. His son played for that team, scored 14 points as a freshman. Isaiah Thomas played for the Celtics, the Suns, a lot of teams.
University of Washington.
Yep, University of Washington. He's like 5'9". His son played and put up a good fight, but Lake City got the win, and so that was a cool experience for them to play in the Portland Trailblazers gym or arena. That's a pretty good. It's a cool story there. The other ones are, we'll do one more. Coeur d'Alene girls, they went to Phoenix, Arizona, played in a tournament with a few other teams. They beat Liberty, Pinnacle, Cathedral Catholic, and Villa Park in their 4 games over last weekend and claimed the Nike Tournament of Champions trophy there as well. Brooksley Colvin, I think, totaled like 135 points, which is incredible.
1,000 points in her career too, and she's only a junior. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So good looking, tournament and weekend for Coeur d'Alene. And then on the boys' side, last weekend, Caden Simmons and the Vikings of Coeur d'Alene went down to the Tarkanian Classic down in Vegas. And Caden Simmons put up some numbers that not a lot of people had seen before. Scored 53 points in a 17-point loss to Alta, which is out of Sandy, Utah. And he had 34 points in the first half and ended up 2 points shy of the school record that was set in 1986 by Kyle Wambolt. 55 was that total. Caden also obviously eclipsed 1,000 points. He's committed to Evansville, I believe. So 53 points, you don't see that. I've seen like Case Wynot score that a few times. Outside of that, not many people
Dave Clute, I think, got there once or twice.
Really? Okay.
Seamus Wilson got over the 50 mark. And then
you see it a little bit in the lower
Engelson, Tyler Engelson got over it from Timberlake last year. And then I want to say, was it Tyson Charlie, I think, did it last year as well.
Well, what do you know? There's a lot of 50-point scores. Yeah, 19 of those points came in the second
And
half.
one of the levels might have hit 50 too in one of their games not that long ago.
Potlatch, that wouldn't shock me.
A couple years ago.
19 points were scored in the second half. He was getting double teamed at that point. Unfortunately, they didn't get the win, but still, they went down to Vegas and, competed with some of the better teams out of the West Coast area.
Yeah. And, I think a fourth story you could say too is the windstorm last week and the amount of postponements that took place. Schedules come January are going to be nuts.
Chaotic. Yeah. Idaho Sports was supposed to cover the Nez Perce Deary game on Friday. And I was texting Casey Ralston, Nez Perce's girls head coach, and we were like, is there going to be a game? Is there going to be a game? And we're like, I don't know. And then we found out that there wasn't going to be one, and they don't know in the rescheduling yet, just because of the amount of people that weren't able to get out of their own driveways in Deary, just with the amount of trees down, not having power. Deary didn't have school for 3 days. So yeah, hope everyone's good.
I think there's still folks around St. Mary's that are without power still. So
yeah, I know Kendrick was hanging out in campers for a long time. Yeah. Tim Silflo, yeah, I think they got their camping experience in late December. I think they'll probably look forward to being back in their homes. But yeah, that's going to be chaotic, is seeing how everything gets rescheduled with league play coming up for a lot of schools in the next few weeks. But let's look at our North Idaho 9. Not a lot of movement. Scaggs as still at the top for the girls. It's Coeur d'Alene, Sandpoint, Lakeland, Lapwai, Grangeville, Prairie, Deary, Kamiah, and then Nez Perce. And then for the boys, Post Falls, Lake City, Sandpoint, Lewiston, St. Mary's, Lakeside, Kendrick, Orofino, and then Prairie and Lapwai still tied for that 9th place spot. Anything you want to change here, Scaggs? You sure? I thought about Moscow. I tell you what, they're getting on a roll. The Moscow girls, the Moscow Lady Bears, they had a big win against Kellogg last week. That one stood out to me.
Yeah, I mean, and it obviously knocked Kellogg off our list, but
that was not a good look for us.
Well, I mean, we said it, the test was going to come, and there it was, and they got shellacked too. So, not really. I think there's still a dividing line too, in the girls, like between 7 and 8. There's those top teams are all pretty darn good. So
yeah, and I would even say after 4, there's still a lot up for debate. I mean, I think Lapway's kind of settled in at that spot, and the rest is really up for grabs. I could see any of those teams climbing. Prairie had that big win against Cami that I think gives you a little bit of separation between the few teams. But I mean, who knows? Cami beat Grangeville too, and Prairie and Grangeville beat Cami. So it's still jumbled up in a huge mess there. On the boys' side, we have all the 5A schools at the top, and then we have 3A, 5A, 6A at the top, and then we have 3A on down. I really think that 5A one, that boys list looks really good to me.
Yep.
I feel like we're not missing a lot. Maybe Kendrick is a little upset about it, but they haven't played for a while.
I think there's going to be some shuffling within there too as the season goes on, especially in the top 4.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know if any one of those teams is going to run the table. Just based on the competition level, I could see Post Falls and Lake City splitting on the season. I could see Sandpoint and Lewiston splitting on the season. So I mean, there's a lot ahead of us because there's a lot of these teams got multiple games postponed last week. St. Mary's, I think of all the teams too, is sitting in a pretty good spot. That win over Kendrick is a pretty nice feather in the cap for the Lumberjacks. But they're going to have to return the trip. That's going to be the thing. They have to go back down to Kendrick and play him again later this year. And I know that Kendrick's going to be itching for some payback. Lakeside quietly just kind of sitting there at 6. That is a team that I don't know where their loss is going to come if it does in the regular season. Just looking at their schedule, I know that they're going to play some upper division teams. I think they play Timberlake and Bonners Ferry. So there could be, a little bit of push there from maybe one of those schools. Kendrick, I think, has the highest ceiling. I mean, they're the defending state champs in 2A.
And bring back all 5 starters.
Yeah, and they brought back all 5 guys. So, I mean, and Orfino quietly undefeated, sitting there at 8, undefeated on the season going into league play. Could they and St. Mary swap spots? Like, that's the other thing too. Orfino could pick up a big win and maybe leapfrog some other teams. So, and then we really haven't seen, Lapway be really tested. They're undefeated at 3-0, but some postponements again. And then Prairie, was missing a couple of guys early in the year that they didn't have when they took that loss to Orfino. Can Prairie make some noise down the stretch? So, the White Pine with those 3 teams in there, and then you throw in, Lakeside, who's another 2A foe. That's going to be, things could get interesting down the stretch. So we'll see how it goes.
Yep, I look at that Lakeside Prairie game in the mid-January and end of January. That home and home is going to be a good test for where the White Pine League is going to lay out or the 2A classification without question. So we'll keep our eyes on that one, and we'll look forward to it. But Scaggs, I think that's it for us on our Christmas episode, the day
Christmas
2 days
Eve,
before Christmas. Christmas Eve. I think we're going to take the week off next week, and then we will be back after the holidays for the new year.
We'll have some lot to talk about. I mean, wrestling could have Raleigh Lane rolling up, and then you got the Avista tournament down in Lewiston, so there's going to be some points to talk about and some tests for a lot of these teams. Sandpoint's going to have a tough stretch of games in front of them on the girls' side, playing the GSL schools. So it'll be interesting to see how, who's taking wins, who's taking losses once we hit the new year and we jump into the league schedule for everybody. So it'll be, there's a lot to talk about over the next, 8 weeks. So.
Absolutely. Well, that'll be it for us on the North Idaho Prepcast. As for Ryan Scaggs, I'm Hayden Uhlenkott, and I'll say Merry Christmas to all, and to everybody. A good evening, good afternoon.